I'd like for you guys to welcome Brian Jacobs.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I put this together tonight to try to, from my experience, give you guys a little bit of advice to a certain degree. And I kind of did it chronologically. So I'm going to look at my career. And as you can tell from my beard, I'm not a young one any longer. I'm going to walk through a series of slides. I'm going to kind of uncomfortably jump around between a few mediums here because some of the recent work that we've been doing is online. And so I'm going to jump from a presentation. Oh, there's somebody else I see. That's nice. A few people coming on. That's good. I like to see some people to know you're there. And you can shake your head if you like. How you doing? If you like something or want to ask a question, I guess at the end. So I'm actually going to share my screen, assuming I can have all these controls here. Actually, you've given me access to that, right, Max? There we go. And I'll give you a little up front. I'm going to give you a little, just kind of a broad look. I'm going to go through a little chronological history and things I learned and so forth and so on. And my goal is to actually give you some input that'll help you. I think you're at the stage where you guys are graduating this year generally. Max, you can tell me yes or not. No, this is sort of like pretty close to graduation.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
A lot of them are juniors and seniors in this class.
Gotcha. Okay. So it's kind of a lame title. Usually I try to think of funny things. You'll see a few of those throughout this presentation. But it really is truly, and this is the first time I've ever actually thought about this. And I thought, okay, I was a student once. I was in your position. What's happened to me, both towards the end of my education or even how I got into design and now, which is, I'm trying to think, 30 years, a little over 30 years. And I've gone through a lot of different changes in that time, and I'm going to kind of highlight those and explain how, they've actually changed my life for the better to a certain degree, and to be sort of prepared for that and those pivots and those changes. And pivot is a big term used right now, given the current conditions. So, but I wanted to make sure, like, if you don't know anything about me, that I just give you kind of the, in a nutshell. I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio. And when I graduated from high school, I drew a little when I was in high school, but I had no idea what graphic design was. In fact, you're much further ahead. The industry has grown so much since then. I didn't know it was even a potential profession. I didn't know it was an education, even though I was living right near one of the best design schools in the world, actually. And so I went to party at the University of Miami, or Miami University, because that's where everybody went to have a good time. And I'd gone to an all-boys Catholic high school, so I was ready for co-ed and having a good time. So you can see the dates here, 84 to 86. I didn't last very long. I took, I'll tell you that story in a second. I'll just give you the broad one here. I actually transferred into the University of Cincinnati College of Design. This is a mouthful, architecture and planning. And I went to, it actually was a 5-year program. I missed a year here in my timeline, but, and it was an internship or a co-op program, which was great because you would go to school all year round and you'd get, when you graduated, I think a year and a half of actual experience working for different firms. And I went to Chicago, New York, a couple of places in Cincinnati. So it was a really good program. And because I had gone to New York, I actually got a job there right out of school. And I worked at a lot of different small design firms in that time frame for 6 years. And then I moved to San Francisco. and I did freelance for a year and a half. And then from there, actually got a job at a firm called Pentagram. Some of you may know Pentagram, a large design consultancy. Most people think of them as a big branding agency, which they are famous for. And I was there for 10 years, maybe 11. And then I started my own firm, Brick, in 2007. So we've been around for a while as well. So this is kind of the big overview. Just get through that quick, get into some details. So, you know, as I was talking about before, you know, I drew silly drawings. My father was an attorney and knew nothing about design. I didn't know anything about design. And as I said, I went to Miami University, and I guess I was a business major. And the second year is when you really start taking business classes. And I took my first economics exam after the first semester, and I called my father, who's here in the middle, and I said, and he said, how did the econ exam go? And I said, I was the first one done. And he said, is that good or bad? And I said, bad. I basically could care less about it and filled out whatever ABC I wanted to. I knew I hated it. And he happened to, at that point, say, I sent you, back in the days of regular old snail mail, a letter with a clipping from the University of Cincinnati College of Design that showed the types of classes you would take. And so I went down, opened that mail, saw drawing, photography, communication design, all these courses, and just changed my life. I was like, that's exactly what I want to do. I transferred, I ended up at Cincinnati, and the rest was history. So my father, who knew nothing about art, design, anything, is the one who influenced me to do that, and somehow just knew instinctively that that was the right thing for me. Maybe slightly disappointed I didn't go into law, but I don't think later on he felt that way. So what did I learn when I was in school? First of all, now in hindsight, I can say, you know, forget everything you learned in school, in the sense that your career is going to evolve. You're going to go into things that you didn't expect, and things are going to change. But there are things that you will probably always carry with you. So I carried a few things with me that weren't really design related. That was just the foundation for me, and understanding, you know, what design was all about. The thing that I actually still think about when I think back is these kind of moments with professors. So the first one was, probably many of you have said these kind of things. You've explained to your teacher what you're going to do. First, I'm going to do the color study. Then I'm going to do this. Then I'm going to research this. And my German Swiss drawing teacher, actually at the time, used to say this. This is pre-Nike, and he would just say, "Stop talking about it and just fucking do it." So I remember that. That's the first thing I remember, and that actually has played a role in my career. If I have people working for me, I say, just stop talking about it, show me, do it. And you know, I live by that, and I behave that way when I design. I force myself to stop thinking and start doing, and then thinking along the way. So that's the first thing. The second one is the dog ate my homework. So this is actually a true story. This is about excuses, right? Like, we all have them. So we say, you know, this happened and I couldn't finish this project or whatever. This isn't going to work in the real world. This literally happened to me. I finished early for the first time toward the end of my school career, and I put everything and wrapped it in tissue on a table, and I went out, and this little dog that was my roommate's dog chewed up every single project. And so I went in to another teacher who had gotten sick of all this, and he said, "You fail. It's always your fault." So I remember this all the time. The buck stops with you. If you're a designer and you're presenting the work or you're putting together something, I'll never forget this, and it scares me. So I try not to have excuses, and I always take responsibility. So that's the second thing. The third one, maybe that stuck with me the most, was the head of the department, who passed away about a year ago or so. His name is Salchow. and this is just a joke I put in here that, you know, at the time, all I can afford is Kmart and TJ Maxx. I don't even know if TJ Maxx was around back then. I just made that up. But what he did is he took us to his house and he said, make design part of everything in your life. And what I mean by that is obviously you can't afford the best design for everything. But the one thing he did was he said, if you're going to buy glassware, if you're going to buy a car, if you're going to, whatever it is, think about design. It doesn't always have to be the most expensive, but make it part of your life. And I've done this not really consciously, but, and you know, can sound a bit snobby, but really what it is like, if I have a choice, what do I think is the best design? And I bring that into my life, right? So, you know, to some degree I do that with everything I think about. And sometimes it is the most expensive and sometimes it's not. So that's kind of the three things I learned, right? So be kind of open and think about your experience in school and think about, what did I really learn beyond just the tools of being a designer and the foundation, and what will carry me through from there. Okay, first color quiz. Maybe the hardest one. If anyone has trouble with this in the end, I can give some hints that might help, but I didn't try to make this too difficult. This might be the hardest one. Okay, so then I moved to New York. This was right out of school, pretty much. I had a couple little minor freelance jobs, and this is where you're going to be if you're a senior and you're about to graduate, pretty much this summer, fall, whatever it is. And what I thought about was, do I want to be, you know, do I want to go for it and work in a big firm, prestigious firm, or do I want to learn a lot more about design and work at smaller firms? So I actually took a job with a small firm. I had 2 or 3 jobs over the period of 6 or 7 years that were all small firms, and I did some freelance work kind of in between. And the thing about it is, and this is everybody's choice, but it's just my experience. So my experience was, by being in a small firm, I did real design work right away. I dealt with clients right away, and I learned the business side of it right away. So there's something to be said for this experience in a short period of time. It doesn't mean you have to work at small firms for 20 years, but certainly, and it was very different then, right? There weren't as many small firms as there are now. So there's a lot more choices. But it was a big distinction. Do you go work at Pentagram, or do you go to a lot of smaller firms? And this really benefited me, and I'll explain why as we go through. So then I moved to San Francisco in '96, and I started off, I actually started off for about a year freelancing. And I actually, what did I do? I was offered a full-time job for $50,000. I remember this in like 1997. That was, to me, a huge amount of money. And I was literally going to sign the papers the next morning. And I got a call from someone at Pentagram who said, hey, we have a 1-week freelance project. So I turned down a full-time $50,000 a year job for a 1-week freelance project. And at that point, this is the reason I did it. I had worked for 5 or 6 years. I knew the business. I knew if I got in here, I was not going to be an intern or junior designer, that I had the opportunity to excel and grow. And basically, after 2 years, I became an associate partner. And this firm's great. It's all over the world. I traveled all over the place, did all kinds of amazing projects. What did I learn at Pentagram? So obviously, being surrounded by great designers, being able to work on big clients, all that kind of stuff, all that typical stuff. I'm not going to go through that. I actually learned that ideas drive design. So I didn't really know this or thought about this. I was just trying to make things look good, right? The first 10 or so years of my career. And all of a sudden, by working with these amazing designers who thought really differently and really thought about design, and were design thinkers and writers way beyond just, you know, I got out of school and started working. And these, I'll show you some examples here, big and small, obvious and subtle. So not always can you have some amazing big idea in everything you do, but if you think about this every time you design something, what's the idea? Whether it's solving a problem, a little story that's integrated. And at this point, I'm doing a lot of branding. So my examples at this point were branding. So these are 3 projects that I worked on. Then I'm going to walk you through. On the left is Windows. You may know that new logo. This is actually the newest logo, the San Francisco Opera and Beats by Dre. All of them have really in-depth detailed stories, but I want to show you so much in this, I might not be able to get into it, but if you have questions later, want some more interesting tidbits about them, feel free to ask. This was the first project this is the old logo on the right. This was the first project that I actually wrote the proposal. And literally the first line is, we do not want this project. First of all, I hate Microsoft. I hated the logo. I hated all their products. I was obviously a designer and a Mac user. And they wanted us to redesign the Windows logo. And I said, unless the next line was, unless you're willing to actually make a big change, don't hire us, because you'll just waste your money. Because we're not going to just, and this is why this project gets really funny, we're not going to just, alter this slightly for you. So the first presentation, so they said, you have the job, which surprised the crap out of me. But anyway, we got the job, many trips to Seattle, presenting to all levels of people. But this was the first presentation. So the first presentation was Apple's an apple, Target's a target, Shell's a shell, Windows is a flag, right? And so that was pretty easy to come to that conclusion. And someone along the way had said, well, it looks like a window, but we need to make it more dynamic and interesting, so make it wave. And I was like, well, not a whole lot of glass waves in the wind. And there was all these, funny conversations. So we said, well, let's evolve it and simplify it and get to a point where the window is still dynamic, but because of its motion and angle and perspective, but it's still a window, right? It still makes sense as a window. So this is kind of like our version of it on the right. It literally took, so these guys are always under, deadlines, right? So they're like, there's no way we can get this sold through. It's just too different. We have to have something in between. So basically, the one on the left is the original. The one on the right is where we ended up. But we always kept selling this idea. And eventually, so this was what we warned them about, right? Oh, it looks a little like glass, but it's still waves. I don't understand the drop shadow, to be honest with you. I don't even know where that came from. That was part of their original one, and they had to put it back in at the last minute. And we did a lot of good work. We did a lot of packaging and so forth and so on. But it basically, what happened was what we told them the reason we didn't want the project. Eventually, over the next few years, through other connections, we did get to the point where, I don't know how it got flipped the other way and some of the details, but basically it got to that point. And they actually adopted the flat view of it, I think, for the Microsoft brand, which you might know now. So that was kind of an interesting story. But this was about ideas, right? It wasn't about some cool new logo from scratch. It was about, a small idea that made sense. And when you see this now, it makes sense, right? It's contemporary, it's perspective, so it's got some dynamism to it, but it makes sense and it's not complicated. So that's the first story. The second one, a little different story. I don't know if anyone's been to the War Memorial Opera House in San Francisco, but by the way, Max, keep time on me a little bit because like a midpoint or something. Thanks. We were hired to redesign the opera logo, San Francisco Opera logo. So the first thing we said is, let's go to the opera. So we went to the opera, we walked in. I'd never been into this building and walked in and sat down and looked. The first thing I did was I looked up, and it's like, this thing is like this is like 300-foot diameter. This is huge. It doesn't look that big here, but it was just the biggest part of the experience, the most kind of impressive part of the experience in this space. So we went through a lot of different sketches because, we owe the client due diligence, but we knew right away that that was the logo. And it's just an abstraction of that shape, but what it evoked, a lot of great things. It's a circle, an O. It looks like fireworks. It looks like, someone said it looks like a flower. I remember we were presenting to the board and everybody was saying all these things. And I said, well, no one said it looks like dog shit, which basically means it's good. That's what marks do. They evoke something different for everyone, but they all recognized it from the actual experience. And so they got that connection, and they eventually bought into it. And then this also led to I don't know if you'll hear the volume here, but see if I can get this to work. Let me know if you can hear this. These are opera voices. So that led to this obvious sort of firework, voice emanating, animation of their logo. And these are just a few applications, sample applications of things. They would do, playbooks or brochures and advertising around the city and so forth and so on. It's not really about the application. It's really about just the idea. Our next brand color quiz. Beats by Dre. So this is a really long story. I'm not going to get into it. I want to show you more broadly what we do. The funny thing so the idea here, regardless of the kind of way we came about during this project, it essentially was we had 1 week to design a brand and headphones and present it to Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovine in LA. And so at Pentagram, we had a product design team. Robert Pruner was the, if you know him, some of you product designers might know him, was the product design partner. My good friend Francois was a designer, and basically Francois and I were given this kind of combo 1 week project. And we actually came up with the name as well. There was kind of a loose version of the name, and we said, hey, Francois started doing sketches. He said, I want to do a perfect circle on each ear. I said, I love circular logos. Let's call it Beats by Dre. And it just all came together in that short time. I've seen things out there. There have been stories about it's basically someone's ear. It's headphones on the side of someone's head. All of it totally untrue. There might have been those kind of subtle things about that we were talking about. Oh, it kind of looks like that after the fact, but none of that's true. It just was, yes, the only thing it did have is kind of this nod to a musical note. The circular form in music is, can't be denied. Records, all kinds, discs, all kinds of things. And that's really how it came together. And we went down and presented, and basically there was a crappier set of headphones that this guy brought to us. And we redesigned them in a week and rebranded, and we presented his headphones. He wanted us to fix them, and we were sitting there, very spellbound by Dr. Dre. Jimmy Iovine's like 4'2", so it was kind of hard to see. And Dre's like 6'6" or something. So it was an interesting combination. And we said, well, you can have those, or we just did this other quickie idea, and you could have this. And he's like, I want that. And that's how it started. And of course, it wouldn't have been anything. It would have just been a logo in my portfolio if it wasn't for Interscope Records and promotions and making a pair for every sports team and doing video and putting them in every video. So we don't take credit for that, but certainly that's a really fun, interesting story that we went through. So this is kind of like the very first presentation we did. So we, mocked up some fake packaging and did the logo. And then that evolved to a whole line of stuff. You guys have I know you've seen all this, and there's Diddy beats and, all kinds of different versions of it at this point. This is even old right here. And it just kind of evolved. And then this is my favorite part. It ended up being the stage at the Super Bowl. I didn't even know this was happening. And then someone sent me this picture. I was pretty shocked. So I guess not many people could say their logo ends up being the stage at the Super Bowl. So here we are, you know, I'm at Pentagram 4 or 5 years. I'm an associate partner. I'm doing all these fun things, working my butt off. And all of a sudden, everyone starts talking about websites and user interface. And of course, we have a product design team, and we have, you know, a marketing side that does graphics. So there are marketing websites, and there's user interface. And they were trying to get a partner to come in from Silicon Valley, or whatever the term was at that time, which was .coms or whatever it was. And they all wanted to, you know, a signing bonus, and they wanted to bring 20 people in. And I sort of just raised my hand and said, I'll try it. So I've been doing all this branding stuff. I'm like, let me try it, right? So I tried to go to school, and I was so busy I couldn't go to school. So I hired my teacher, who was a website developer. She's become pretty famous too. And we hired her, she came in, we worked together, we built a team, basically started doing all kinds of web work. The very early stuff, which I'm going to show you the first one here, is kind of a joke, but fun and different. Like, I wasn't thinking like, I was trying not to think like a print designer, but that I couldn't help myself. But I was, you know, I had a guy that could do Flash, and so we just went nuts and did weird, crazy stuff. But that led to one of the better sites that I did at the time. So this is still a while ago. And this is called Lines Ballet, Alonzo King Lines Ballet. And of course, gorgeous photography. And at that time, no one was doing these full screen websites. So I'm like, well, why wouldn't I want that photography to be the biggest, most amazing thing on the page? And this is a slideshow, so it changes all the time. And just make the type, the navigation, beautiful type, really simple, with very interactive. And this was 2000, I think, when we did this. So it was very different than anything else. This has led for me to so much work in the arts, architecture. I'm going to show you some of this stuff as we go here. And we've redesigned this site a couple times from here, but basically, this was just an amazing project that just opened up all kinds of doors and made me think, hey, I should think differently about interaction in web design, and I shouldn't just follow, you know, all the typical things that are going on. So I still do that. Totally opposite project. So this is the first touchscreen ATM that was ever out. So Wells Fargo hired us. And here's the idea here. So remember, I'm talking about ideas, right? So I'm talking about ideas drive design. This is nothing big in terms of a design for a touchscreen. The big thing was, we sat down, and the first thing I said was, what do you do 99.9% of the time every time you go to the ATM? And everyone said, I withdraw 30 bucks, 40 bucks, 100 bucks, whatever your number was. That's what you do 99% of the time. It's not 1,200 bucks. I keep telling myself I need to change that number in this layout, but that was the idea, is that we either knew, you know, we either track you, or you could input what, like online, what number you like to withdraw, and it's a one touch. So basically, that quick cash on the left was the idea of this. It wasn't the design. There's nothing much about the design. It was just the fact that you could go up and just hit one button and not have to go through all the steps. So there's another little example of that. We also started, this led to doing all the interaction for touchscreens for United Airlines, for all the monitor backdrops. You know, it used to be that little slidey numbers and, you know, analog kind of stuff. So we ended up doing all this, and unfortunately right before 9/11, so a lot of it didn't get implemented, but this was, you know, this was the first time anyone was doing this kind of stuff. And it was hardcore information design, animation to go from different types of content. We did all the flight information displays. So this kind of came out of that simple little Wells Fargo project. And then for product designers out there, you're going to laugh about the interaction here, but this is because it's super old. But you know, the little scroll bar on the side of the thing, not necessary any longer. Touch screens weren't really that economical at that point. But we ended up doing all kinds of interaction design for products that Robert Bruner's team was doing, and And then eventually he left, I left with him. We each started our own firm. We got into a space together. We worked together on a lot of projects. We kept doing beats together for many years after that. Just this whole idea of raising my hand and changing my direction has just opened up all kinds of doors. And I still think brand is at the heart of everything that I do. But this really was a big pivoting point for me. Oh, our last color quiz. All right, so in 2016, I started Brick. And because of my experience up until then, we truly at that point were multidisciplinary. We were doing identity, all kinds of print projects, packaging, websites, UI, UX for online applications, for product design. We were working with teams on environments. I've worked with Max and his group on projects and collaborated with environments and signage. We do a lot of motion design. And, you know, it was great. It was small group, but we really had a variety of projects. And that's what interests me more than anything, is at that point, it wasn't about like being a specialist and only doing one thing. It was about being a generalist. There's nothing wrong with being a specialist. I just liked being a generalist in the sense that I could apply my design thinking to any kind of project, get people involved that knew more than me or were better than me, and collaborate. And that's really what's happened since we started Brick, and continues to on a slightly different scale, but basically. And then I think this is where I'm going to jump out. So this is just a bunch of stuff, variety of stuff that we're doing and we've done over the years. Just kind of going through. Actually, it was running before I just kind of go back here. And so again, we're working with all different scales of clients across all different disciplines, different industries, and kind of incorporating all these things, you know, like being humorous, having an attitude, thinking about things a little differently, trying to make ideas, trying to really inject ideas into everything that we do. And we have worked for a long time, and I'm not sure if you realize this, Max, but a firm called Impact, which is your old firm's name, they're now called Impact XM, and they're a exhibit and they're a event company. And I'd always done kind of interactive things for them because they did live exhibits. So as you can imagine, you know, since the pandemic happened, all those live events are canceled. And suddenly they come to me and say, everyone wants to do something online, but they want to do 3D experience. They want to do 3D experiences online. Like, it's now becoming more like, oh, okay, that's a little bit of a nutty idea and it costs too much and it's difficult, but really it's still happening. And so for really almost for a year, we've probably been busier than we've ever been. I feel guilty to a certain degree about that, but I also, you know, realize like that all the work that we've done kind of led to this. So this kind of confluence of online, immersive, virtual, 3D, all these things. How can we work with these people that we've worked with and kind of do this work, right? So this is kind of my phrase that I felt because it's just like, it feels like every week has lasted a year. And these 3D environment, I'm going to show you a couple quick examples. And you kind of see where like I try to think a little differently about, and some are very straightforward. Some actually I'm going to go to those sites. So here's an example of more of a straightforward one. So this is, does everyone know who Florence Nightingale is? The kind of founder of nursing, I guess is what you call her. And this company, ESI, this Japanese company, they use her as sort of their mascot, right? and it was her, I believe it was her birthday. And so they asked us to do an exhibit. So the idea was that essentially design a space, a gallery to exhibit her work. And this is, what you're seeing here is based on what's called a coxcomb chart, if anyone knows what that is. And it's a chart that she made during, I'm not going to recall the exact war, but that would kind of, it was an infographic, right, that showed how people, based on the quality of care and what's the word, inside of a hospital when they don't have very good conditions and people were getting sicker and they would catch diseases inside the hospital. So she did this sort of death rate coxcomb chart. And so what we did is, this is basically for her whole life. So the idea here is that we would build this 3D space, and this uses, funny enough, an old web, it's called WebGL, you might know it, to try to get, basically do gaming on it years ago, and it never really caught on very well. And the whole, so basically you're dropped into this whole space and you can spin around, you know, you can decide, like you can click on walls and go up the walls. So this is, you know, it's a traditional layout. It's not anything fancy design-wise, but it's like kind of information. You can go up, you can read about her life. You can click over to other spots. So it's just a combination of interaction, information. Here's the coxcomb chart that the space was based on and how it's used today. You can navigate through this top-down view. You can watch video, you can take a quiz, you know, all these kind of fun things. So this was kind of our first foray, like right around March, April, into this kind of idea. And then we started getting a lot of requests for doing spaces and so forth. And, you know, some of them became, you know, fairly boring, normal spaces. Some were a little bit more jet TV, like, you know, there's this one, the content's horrible. You know, we were just kind of designing the space and the idea. This is a pharmaceutical company. And then we decided to try something completely different. So we said, well, instead of you being in a space, what about the space being really small and you're outside of it and you can spin it around and you can go inside if you want. So that led us to, and believe it or not, all the examples I'm showing are pharmaceutical companies, which is amazing. So this is one of the more interesting ones that we developed. So the idea here is that there's this cube that you can spin around, and even the mouse kind of shows you in perspective where you are. And you can spin it around and you can click and you actually go into, it's called the impossible cube. They actually said, we want to make an impossible cube. And we were like, okay. And the idea is that you can go in from this side or you can spin it all the way around and go in from the opposite side. So there's sides, but there's not really sides. Like, so that was kind of interesting. So, you know, everything just sort of evolved to, what is this 3D, what is this virtual experience that doesn't look like a website, that feels different? And it even led to, you know, like more of a, this is kind of washed out here. This is like an old version of it. But the idea of interaction online, that's just more interesting and engaging, right? It's dimensional, but it's, you know, it's not a real space. It's not, you know, what you would expect. So we're kind of evolving all these ideas and we're doing even new things now, really different things. Also led to doing some interesting websites for architects. So for instance, you know, I think I showed you the Lines Ballet, and that kind of evolved into all these websites for architects and the arts. And this was one of the more interesting ones where it's just a very interactive website. And you can click in and scroll. This is probably the craziest one. It's called Form 4. The designer at this company is award-winning guy and has all these kind of crazy ideas. So right brain and left brain, and he really loved this idea of like scrolling. This is him here with his hair sticking up. So this whole website is like they can put in all these different features. Like, you know, what was the inspiration for this church that they designed? It was the lily, and you know, just kind of all these really crazy stuff. And then the left side is all their practice, and the right side is all their philosophy. So you know, the work we try to do really different kind of things. We try not to stick to convention in terms of websites. We still do basic stuff, you know, that are easy to, some of these are kind of challenging. So we definitely still do marketing sites and things like that. And of course, I'm showing you the things I really like. So that's kind of where Brick is now. And I'm going to go back here. And, you know, there's kind of like things to summarize that I think are the most important things. Anytime somebody ever starts saying something that sounds important, I always use their first name and FF and say, oh, that's, you know, Max's Fabulous Facts. And so these are really kind of, they're silly, but they're things I think that are important to think about. You know, you're not just a designer. And when I started talking about the big fish in a small pond idea, really consider that when you're starting your career, because you will learn a lot more about these things. And what I realized is that I became a researcher, a historian. I still am big on the history of graphic design, and have met a lot of people that are mentors. You're a presenter. You need to express yourself. You need to sell your work. Actually, I forgot to put that in. It's probably one of the most important ones. You're a salesman or a saleswoman. You're a mentee maybe at first and a mentor eventually, and you should be socially conscious. So you should think about what the impact of your work is. The second paragraph here is a little bit more interesting. You need to be self-aware. So I worked with so many people that said, I am a logo designer. And I said, you are the worst logo designer I've ever met, but you are an excellent book layout person, right? So I'm not saying you can't learn, but I'm saying be self-aware of what you're good at and what you're not good at. And you'll most likely enjoy your life more if you do the things you're good at. You're more likely to enjoy what you do if you're good at them. And especially if you don't have people like me telling you you're the worst logo designer ever met. But be prepared. I mean, that is the most important thing. The more preparation you do in designing and more preparation you do for presenting your work, you'll be confident, you'll feel confident, that confidence will come off. Be responsible. It's going back to what I learned from some of my professors. I take all responsibility. If I misspell a word, I'm upset. I take responsibility. If I miss a deadline, it all comes down to you. Even if you're not running the firm, but it's your project, you are responsible. Always be willing to learn, be willing to pivot, which changed my life, and take chances. And always surround yourself with good design if you can. So that's my BFF or BFFs. So we do all kinds of things. We still do things for charity. We do things for social causes. We do things for design events. So this is just kind of a little bit of that, you know, just to give you a flavor. I love to do posters and I love type. So we do a number of these kind of things. And back to the quiz.
That was Tiffany and Company, Subway, and Windows. All right. Very cool. Brian, thank you so much. And guys, you are more than welcome to start asking questions now. Brian, how did you land your job at Pentagram?
Yeah, I told a little bit about that story. Let's see. I actually, so if anyone knows who Kit Heinrichs is, he's been around for a long time. He's a print, you know, designer there for many, many years, partner there. And he is always willing to interview people. He's great. And I literally sat with him because they were looking for someone at one point, and you know, I had my resume out everywhere. And so I sat with him for like 2 hours at his desk and talked to him. And I think I was the first one he interviewed. And they ended up not hiring anybody. 6 months went by. That's when I got the offer at this other small place. But they had my name on file. And I get resumes all the time, and sometimes we don't even get a chance to respond, but we always keep them. And if you do have a chance to meet with somebody, I always remember them, I file them, and it's all about timing, right? So the timing was, we need somebody who's mid-level, mid to senior level for a 1-week project for AT&T. And so they started calling, and I was on the list, and I picked up the phone, and that's when I said I turned down a full-time job. Like, basically, they were so mad at me for going on this freelance job at Pentagram. We ended up being friends later, but basically I turned them down for a 1-week freelance, and I never left. I ended up there full-time. And really, it was, the reason I stayed was more important than how I got the job. And the reason I stayed was, Kit was so busy. People would be lining up outside his door to get his opinion on everything. But because I'd worked for 7 years and I just got on with it, right? I just did it and presented to my own clients, that I just got on with it. And he literally would ask me, like, a month later, he'd say, whatever happened to that so-and-so project? I'm like, oh, we printed that, a month ago, and it's all good. And he'd go, oh, okay. So I just bypassed him for years. And eventually he couldn't take it anymore. And he's like, all right. So it's really how I kept it, or how I stayed, than how I got it. I was just tenacious. I sent my resume out everywhere. I would call people back. I didn't bug them, but I would call them back. And this was a time when there wasn't as much competition, to be honest with you. So, I understand the situation now. There weren't as many design schools. There weren't as many good designers. So it's tough, but you've got to be tenacious. One of the things I was going to do tonight is have a poll question. I have all these poll questions, like, what do you really want to do with your design career? But they didn't quite make sense with everything else. But you don't have to plan it all out. There's a certain amount of going with the flow, and you don't have to land the perfect job the first time. You need to get the experience. You need to get mentors. You need experience to get to the point where you get to a firm like Pentagram. And I would have been an intern if I started there right out of school, and I would have gone nowhere. So hopefully that's a good answer.
Yeah, that's actually great. And there was a question that you had talked a little bit about going to New York, and what was the branding experience that you gained there that kind of helped you transition to be able to get into Pentagram?
I mean, I wouldn't say I had a very good portfolio, but the places I was working at in New York, at that time, we were doing a lot of financial stuff. So there were companies that were kind of nobody at the time that we would do some branding work for, and a lot of brochure work and little things that became bigger companies later. I couldn't even tell you what they are now, but so when I showed my portfolio, say 5 years later, that was a fairly well-known company. But when we were doing it, it was like a nothing company. It was just, a small deal. But I was doing a lot of financial stuff. It was really boring. I mean, I learned about 401ks though, and realized how much more I could make if I started investing in my 20s at that point. That was about it. I think we did HDTV, the first HDTV, wasn't HDTV, starts with an R. Anyway, brochure at the time, some company that was really just getting into high def and doing some stuff. But yeah, I had a pretty bad portfolio, actually. I just knew how to, I just learned how to work and how to talk to clients and how to sell stuff. And really, that's what got me started. I learned more about design at Pentagram, working with people and beyond, than I could have ever before. But if I wouldn't have been exposed to them in the same way if I had started off as an intern or a junior designer. They right away, because I was more senior, we would collaborate, and eventually I was working with the partners on projects, all over the world. So yeah, every experience is different, but don't be afraid of small. Get started and learn the business, learn how to be a real practicing designer early on. Don't just always go for the Google, Apple jobs, or wherever it is you're looking. You might find it kind of depressing, actually. I'm kind of reading
Thinking of
through a little bit.
some of those projects that you worked on that were kind of startups. Have there been any that you would say that assumed was going to be nothing that turned into being something that you're like surprised that you see pretty much everywhere now?
Well, beats for sure. I mean, that's ridiculous when you think about it. Nobody thought much about it at the time. You know, I mean, yeah, we thought Dr. Dre, that's cool, but it wasn't even a guarantee he was going to do it. It was more like, so this little bit more of the story there was a speaker guy. I owned a small speaker place in like Seattle. Came down to visit us, had a product designer do these headphones for him, had a meeting in a week with Dr. Dre. He just bugged Dr. Dre until he said he would meet with him. But he had this problem with the headphones. They weren't working and there was a part problem. And so he came to us and said, can you help me? And the fun thing is you'll get to go meet Dr. Dre. And Robert Bruner said, no, I don't do these kind of projects. And I pulled him out of the office and I said, let's just do our own thing. Let's just fix this problem. Let's just have fun, you know? Because at that time I was kind of hanging out with this guy, Francois, and we were all trying to collaborate on something. And he said, all right. So we didn't get paid for it. In fact, nobody got paid for it. It was all royalties, except me. I wasn't a full partner. I was an associate partner. So all the Pentagram partners got royalties, which, as you can imagine, paid off quite nicely over the years, right? It was only for the first set of headphones, but basically they're all millionaires because of it. Let's just say that. And I have it in my portfolio. But that one just blew up like ridiculous, right? Every time I turned around, there was like a gold one on Notre Dame, you know, the quarterback for Notre Dame. And it was just in all these music. That's why it took off, because it was marketed in that way through that machine that was Interscope Records and Jimmy Iovine.
And there's all kinds of projects that are like that are out, you know, they're supported by stars or celebrities that take off and die. And Beats has been one that actually stuck.
And then they sold it to, you know, Apple for what, $1 billion?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have another question. At your caliber of experience, how often do you get projects that come easily like the SF Opera House?
I don't think so. One thing I didn't really talk about is, you know, I got involved with professional organizations like the American Institute of Graphic Arts. I got involved heavily in local arts things like Yerba Buena Center for the Arts, Lions Ballet. And so none of my work really comes from somebody going to my website. It's all referral, it's all recommendation. And, you know, a lot of times the projects I think are going to be great or sound good, or the company sounds great, turn out to be the crappiest ones, and the ones that sound bad turn out to be the best ones. But the one thing fairly consistent, because it's beautiful stuff, it's the arts, is, you know, ballet, opera, performance art, and we're doing a ton of stuff right now for YBCA, Yerba Buena Center for the Arts, because of course their big thing was they had this, if anyone knows that up here, it's, you know, big theaters and spaces, and that's their revenue, is to rent out those theaters. And then they have exhibits and they exhibit artists, but their real goal is to like support artists in the community. And so we're doing an app, actually kind of like a private social network app for artists right now. And we did their website. So they don't come, they're once every few years, but they're usually long-term clients and bigger projects. So it's not like, you know, and then, you know, one opera, like we're doing the Civic Center website, because in COVID they had a marketing budget and they had to spend it, right? They couldn't spend it on anything other than web stuff. So we're doing their website. it's all weird how it comes, but it's all referral. It's all a friend knows somebody or recommends, or somebody I work with. Almost all my work too is with a client that has moved from one place to another. So once you establish those relationships and they go to different firms, they bring you in as part of a team that they like to work with. So it all changes as you get older, and I'm sure as I get even older, it will change, and I'll hopefully still have clients. But that middle part was the most important, that pentagram experience, learning how to present my work and deal with everything myself, that led me to being able to have my own business. It was totally critical.
Yeah, I would say networking and getting connected through your local and regional organizations really helps, for sure. Yeah.
So there's a question about these posters. I can just answer that if that's okay. Rise and Shine is a once a year. It's actually a law firm that puts on a morning of design talks. And of course, this year they can't do that in person, so they call it Rise and Shine online. And basically, it's just as simple as the idea of taking a rising sun and pixelating it, right? And I know pixels are probably an antiquated way to look at something online, but they are still pixels. And I just thought it looked cool. Unity in the middle. This was a bunch of designers all over the world were asked to do a poster on Unity. And, there were some great things. Mine was, I just like type and I like figuring around. So mine was just about, the basic integration of black and white. San Francisco was another AIGA. It was kind of a poster auction. So they asked designers to do posters about San Francisco. So that's all that one was. But we do all kinds of things, pro bono stuff, charity stuff, industry kind of things. These are just a few examples. With the experience of different design projects, what are 3 things you recommend for new designers like us? That's a good question. I'm going to try to pull that out of my talk a little bit. I would say, don't hold, I think, first of all, I'm sure you're all looking for work. Join a professional organization if you can. Maybe you can get the student price. Maybe there's a COVID price now, who knows? But network with peers and go to the events, because that is invaluable to networking and getting the next job and someone remembering you, whatever it is. So right away, get involved in that. And trust me, you don't want to do it when you're older, right? Your energy level is, I want to stay home with my family. I don't want to go to all these, cocktail parties and presentations and sit through boring speakers like me and blah, blah, blah. When you're young, you do. It's fun. Do it. Big time. Number 2, take whatever work you can get, whether that means free work, freelance work, the crappiest job. You can go to what you think is the crappiest firm, but do good design. Don't think that, now you might not get the best mentor there, or you might find someone there that actually is a really good designer that also is in a crappy job and hates it, but get working, either on your own projects, freelance, anything you can do. I do stuff for my family still to this day, like, once a week. Can you do me a t-shirt for blah, blah, blah? Just do it. Just design as much as you can. And did you say 3? Did you ask for 3 things? Oh, what's my 3rd one? I guess my 3rd one is, even if you get a job, always look for the next job. So never feel satisfied, right? Like, send your resume out, put together a killer portfolio website, whatever it is, share it with people, Never stop looking for the next job. I guess I could probably have 5 or 6, but I think 3 is enough.
That's probably good. It's definitely a good a good thing to always keep in the back of your mind, whether it's for more work or more opportunities. Keep going. I think we have
What are some of
another
your
question.
favorite projects?
So aside
Yeah,
from
what are some of
obviously
my
the ones
favorite
that you
projects?
show, is there anything
Right.
that's just maybe one that the results aren't necessarily great, but you enjoyed the project or enjoyed the brand, working with a brand?
Well, as I think about that, let me tell you something that kind of relates to it. It's not always so there's a difference between a project and a brand and who you actually work with, right? So there are clients that I work with that I love that I never get very good stuff out of. There are clients that I hate that I get good stuff out of, and everything in between. So it's hard to kind of say like what the favorite is, but to be honest with you, the favorite is, and I actually try to get Pentagram. I don't know if you know this. Pentagram does a compendium every so years, and they put together all the work for a period of time in this big, thick, honking book that, is like a rock. Gorgeous stuff. I don't know if they're doing it for the past few years, but what I always try to get them to do is do a book on things that were never sold. So what I mean by that is I actually went to Pentagram office in Notting Hill in London has a gallery in the front. And one of the original partners, who was an industrial designer, and God, I'm forgetting his name now, had all the stuff that he never sold. One was basically the baby Bjorn. It was like a molded plastic, right? One was this camera. I mean, it was the best work I've ever seen. And I look back at my work, the best work I've done never saw the light of day. And, the idea of actually putting that in your portfolio, the work that never, that either was the best version of what you were selling, but they picked some other crappy logo, or the better poster design, but you chickened out, I don't know, whatever it was. That is by far the best part of the job, and the best work is like, I really love that. That sucks, but it's out there in the world, but I really love that. Anyway, that's my best answer. It's kind of hard. There's so many projects at this point. I don't think I have a favorite, just that experience.
We have a question. Do design or creative and design jobs get cut as often as we hear about when budget cuts come around?
Well, it depends on what industry you're in. So, what's funny is there's like a pattern of certain kinds of companies that have marketing budgets and certain things that are expected every year. So if that marketing budget gets cut, yes, jobs get cut, right? And then a design firm that relies on that company. So here's a good example. The North Face. My sister-in-law does project management for a design firm that does work for the North Face. And they basically have to produce a certain amount of things every year. Like they're on a real strict schedule. And COVID threw all that off, right? They weren't selling as much, all that kind of stuff. So a lot of design firms have those kind of clients that rely on this whole year's worth of work, and then multiple years after that, kind of goes on and on. Mine is so diverse. Like I have good years and bad years all the time. I'm sure you're like this too, Max. It's like you can have, we're cranking this year, but last year sucked big time. But if I'm happy and I'm doing the work and I'm just, even if I'm making a living that year, probably have to pay less taxes, I'm okay. I don't hire as much when that happens, but now suddenly with all this work, I need freelancers, I need people doing stuff all the time. So the network grows. So it depends on where you work. You can kind of get it. You should be thinking about that. Like what kind of clients that firm has, what's the stability based on that kind of work? Do they rely on, do they have a cash cow and then a lot of things? So my work is just all over the place. Budgets are teeny to huge, and it's dispersed among all kinds of clients. I don't rely on anybody. I just have relationships. Some firms work completely differently. They really rely on the North Face, right? Or Apple or whoever it is. And those places you can find you're out of a job if something happens.
Yeah, I would say
I don't know if that answered your question, but
that's been
my,
kind of the secret to us being able to last through 2 recessions. We've been in business for 16, 17 years, and it's the being diverse enough that we do have some big clients like USC and some other product clients, but having work all over the place in lots of different industries, it allows you to kind of weather those storms a little better. All right.
Can I ask a question of everybody?
Yeah, Brian, go ahead.
I guess to help me in the future with this kind of stuff, like I hate when it's all about just like showing your work and, going, look at this cool thing I did. I wanted to get some thing in there that maybe influences you or helps you or whatever it is. And just curious if some of you got something out of it from that standpoint. And I guess that's a chatty thing.
Yeah, you can either chat or you can pop open your microphone if you want to say yes or no. Either way.
Yeah, it's fine to say no too.
Brian's used to harsh critiques, so.
Oh yeah.
Can you guys hear me?
Sorry.
Yes, go ahead, Logan.
Logan.
Okay, cool. We've had plenty of lectures this semester, and not everyone can come off as super personable or authentic, and I think you did that really well. And I was actually going to ask this as a question. Do you think the industry standard is that way or not when it comes to presentations?
That's an awesome question, dude. That's an awesome question. I don't know where the hell I got my attitude, and I don't know, I'm sure when I first started, I didn't have much of one, right? Part of it is I was around a lot of British people at Pentagram who had a lot of attitude, and they kind of, it rubbed off on me. But I always liked humor. I always liked, like, I'm not like, David Carson crazy designer. I'm pretty Swiss conservative, all that kind of stuff. But that thing I learned about getting an idea in there, right? And I love typography, so that kind of, like, I always played with type. But that always made me feel like if I went in to present and I had that little nugget of like a surprise, right? Or I said something that kind of freaked everybody out, like the board of SF Opera, a bunch of old parts, right, sitting around. And I said, well, you didn't say it looks like a pile of dog shit. But I backed it up with that actually means something. It wasn't just a joke. I wasn't just trying to be silly. It was like, you all said positive things about a symbol. Everyone has an interpretation of symbols. They always do, You didn't say it looks like a swastika. You didn't say it looks like a pile of shit, whatever. I didn't say swastika. But the fact is, they're all positive, and that's part of branding. You can't, everyone has a different interpretation of what do you think is the bite out of the apple? What does that mean to you? Right? Like, so if I think you should have your personality in design, because I don't think as long as you're smart and not stupid and say the really bad, wrong thing or have it backed up with something, people will start to relate to you and they'll start to trust you. That's the key. And Max, I'm sure you know this. Once you get the trust, they'll listen to you no matter what every time. You might be wrong, they might argue with you, and that trust has to do with a personal relationship, and that personal relationship only comes through just like lighten up a little bit and don't be so formal all the time and have conversations and be honest. I mean, being honest and transparent. Like, I got a meeting with a client tomorrow morning and I haven't done work on their job for like a week and I'm scared crapless, but they'll be okay. I'll explain and I'll say I'll make it up to you. So just, have an attitude but back it up and be transparent and honest and authentic. And don't be stiff. But when you sell, you need to have done your research, right? Like when you're showing something, you need to have the story right. And it doesn't have to be long or complicated. It could be a really simple idea, but have it right, and have it strong, and you'll be okay. And yeah, be funny. Life's too short.
All very good, Brian. I would like to extend the thanks of both the department, the class, and myself. I'm really happy to have you help round out our semester. This has definitely been an interesting one, transitioning from almost exclusively in class into exclusively remote, and coming up with how do certain personalities come across. I'm kind of had a good feeling that you would be able to let your personality shine in a random Zoom meeting with 60 other people. So thank you again, and have a great holiday season. I'm sure we'll be catching up with you and hopefully see you out in the desert.